But the thing that interests me most about this Persephone addition into this is precisely that it was not there when the 12 chapters were initially leaked back in 2008, because I definitely would have remembered it. I was so obsessed. I read those chapters over and over. So I was very taken off guard about where the heck Persephone even came from. And I was trying to figure out like why, or just like how Persephone just started emerging in Meyer's writing. Like when it's from Bella's perspective in Twilight, she is always comparing Edward to Michelangelo's David. And when I saw David in person in college, I was finally like, oh, okay, I get it. That now makes sense. He's a fine statue. But that to me sort of seemed like the limits of like any sort of classical engagement that she was going into. So I was just like, well, why Persephone of all things? And I knew the answer. It was buried deep, but I had to sort of go back to the years that I had spent personally on the internet, which is about, I became really into blogging like 2012 to 2016 on Tumblr specifically. And any given day on Tumblr, you could probably see one of these fan casts for various Greek gods. Here are two for Persephone, one for Persephone and one for Persephone and Hades that I just grabbed out. And this whole emergence of sort of like online digital classicisms and aesthetics and other things that were coming out. And I'm reluctant to even go back and talk about like this phase of my life from like very late teens to very early 20s, precisely because this was one of the ways that I was just like, racism online, interesting. I watched youth like me just get into horrible fights with each other about just what precise skin tone certain Greek gods could be. And I was just like, guys, why do we care about this so much? Like, I was like, I feel like we don't even know that much about myth. And I was like, maybe I should go study myth. And here I am. It's amazing. But I have to wonder about like the intense culture around like digital classicisms that was striking up from the mid-aughts going forward to the contemporary, because it is something potent and it is something that does inspire people into classicisms. And I would have to do a lot deeper research around Meyer and sort of trace a lot of patterns. But like, I even remember there was definitely Bella Edward, like Greek god fan fiction and like stories inspired by Persephone. So part of me is like very curious in looking at the ways in which Meyer is trying to use and create this like very specific type of world. And if you had told me, you know, when I was in middle school that I would like be giving a graduate like level presentation for myself on Stephanie Meyer, like I would have been like, what are you, that does not sound like it's possible or credible. And yet here we are, the digital age makes these things possible. And I know that I started a little late, so I'm going to try to wrap this up really quick because I know I'm right at time. I did just want to share though around, go back, there we go. Impact though, because it's just kind of like, well, Vanessa, what is the point of learning about any of this? Because these things do have weird, bizarre, fascinating real world impacts on things. And one of the strangest, most bizarre impacts that I can sort of find actually comes from a Black singer that I really, really love. Now, Robert Pattinson, who's pictured here, he portrayed Edward Cullen in the Twilight series. He was also Cedric Diggory in the Harry Potter series. And he actually received copies of, or a copy of Midnight Sun to read to get into character for Edward. And he said that he hated the guy. And having finished Midnight Sun, I can kind of understand why. In 2014, Robert Pattinson started dating alternative music artist FKA Twigs, which ended up being, they were actually engaged for a brief second, and they seemed like a couple that was very in love. However, Twigs also, pretty immediately after they started dating, tweeted out this: "I'm genuinely shocked and disgusted at the amount of racism that has been infecting my account the past week." And while she didn't really dive in further around racism between fans of Robert Pattinson at the time, she did actually finally this year delve into it a bit more. She was on a podcast called Grounded with Louis Theroux, where she said, he was their white Prince Charming, and I think they considered he should definitely be with someone white and blonde and not me. Say if I was wearing a red dress, they would have a monkey in a red dress, or I was on a bike, they would find a monkey on a bike. It had this massive dysmorphic effect on me for about 6 months to a year. Every time I saw my pictures, I would think, gosh, I look like a monkey, and people are going to say that I look like a monkey. Now, this is obviously horrible and heartbreaking, and especially like she's one of my favorite artists, and I think she's such a powerful, tends not to really care what other people think. So hearing this for me was pretty shocking. And yet as a result, she created, this is concept art, and then this is her album cover for her album Magdalene, which is based off of around Mary Magdalene from the Bible, which is, she goes through this 9-song music album to talk about her breakup with Robert Pattinson. And I just wanted to share it because it not only brings up a lot of themes around Magdalene, desire, self-sacrifice, but I also have tentatively sort of added it to a Persephone folder for myself, because I think there is this interesting sort of push and pull around, especially catabasis, that FKA tends to engage with. And so I really want to delve into these things further. And to conclude, I don't know what to do with this difficult situation, because it really just sort of popped up as I was trying to create this paper. The one area that I could think to go to moving forward is perhaps Imani Perry's work, Vexy Thing, on gender in liberation as a framework for us to think through. Chapter 4, she gets into sort of digital identity, which is entitled Simulacra Child, Hypermedia, and the Mediated Subject. But other than that, I don't know what to do. I mean, these two books are basically opposite ends of 50 years of like the past Persephone reception, which I feel like the past 50 years tends to be the areas of reception that receptionists are not the best at. But on the one hand, we have Morrison dealing with these very intense issues of race and aesthetic. And on the other hand, we have this like vampire love story that is also dealing with issues of race and aesthetic, but wrapped up in very different and very interesting Persephone narratives. Now, as I said, we know a lot of Morrison's history with classicism and that backstory, and research has already been done on that. However, we don't about Meyer. We don't know where these things come from. And in fact, this is the best guess that I have, and it is genuinely a guess, but it's a guess that I felt the need to make because, as I said while I was watching the last Res Difficiles, I was like, wow, classical digital epistemologies, like that is something that we don't have language for. We don't know how to talk about. The fact that there is pop classics, popular classics, like what else would you call all the classical movies that get made? What else would you call half the things that are talked about online? And so that's why I wanted to draw these two books to everyone's attention and some of the weird, strange commonalities between them. Mostly because as someone who studies myth and music and hair and aesthetics and all of these things and how they play in and loves reception, I don't quite know what to make of this. I don't know how to talk about Midnight Sun as Persephone reception. So if folks have thoughts, I would be more than happy to hear them, because I am quite honestly baffled. And if my presentation seemed at all just like hesitant or stuttering at times too, that is mostly why. Like, I'm very embarrassed like at times to even just bring up this subject. So I would love to hear folks' thoughts, and thank you so much for listening to this very bizarre take on Persephone.